Everyone, it's Nancy Reyes with For Your Canine.
And Joanne Soike with For Better, For Worse.
And Lisa Bataska with Canine Defined.
Hopefully you guys are surviving daylight savings time because it's been challenging today. I don't know why that is, but it is. Losing an hour of sleep is not so fun. Anyway, today's topic is about maintaining behaviors. This came up with some people. There's a school of thought out there that if you just teach it, they should remember it and they just should know it. Dogs that should behaviors. It's just like us, right? If we learn something, if we practice it, we'll remember. We'll keep getting good at it, and if we don't, it's going to go away. And I can speak a little bit about language, right? I am bilingual. I speak mostly English all the time. When I lived at home, I spoke, and I had a job in the military where I spoke Spanish and English pretty evenly. So my language skills stayed up. So now I have to really be, granted, it's, I've been bilingual my whole life, but every once in a while when I'm talking to my dad or some of my family members, I might forget a word here and there. So I have to really be conscious to work that muscle to remember that word, which is very similar like in animal behavior. Sometimes we teach something and we don't practice it or reinforce it, and we expect the dog to be like, okay, yep, they should know it because we did it 6 months ago. So it doesn't really work that way. So that's what we wanted to kind of chat about a little bit, and kind of and if you guys have any questions about it, that would be fantabulous, right? So a couple of things to be a master at something, or to get really, really good at something, you have to do it a lot. And I think, Joanne, I think it's like to become an expert, you have to have like 1,000 reps or something,
or
like
hours, or
hours or reps, or some very large numbers. So it takes a lot to be expert at something or really good at something. Obviously, it takes a lot less than that just to learn a behavior for the dog, but it still takes some time. And I think in when you're training things, some dogs pick up certain things or concepts or behaviors so much easier than others. And in that same dog, you might have one behavior might be easy peasy, the next behavior might be a little more challenging. So it's something to consider when you're wanting to maintain, and what you're also thinking about when you're wanting to train your dog. So like when Lisa and I used to teach Puppy in basic, Lisa still does, but and Joanne, I used to always say you have to pick and choose what you're going to use, because not every family is going to want the same things, right? Like to be honest, certain behaviors I don't really use very much. Like I don't use place very much, or I hadn't in the past, right? So to be honest, it didn't work on it much. But the behaviors that I use in my regular day-to-day life, I do use. I do train a little harder. So that's kind of what we tell people. It's like these are the behaviors we're going to work on in this class or whatever, but you need to decide what you're going to use or what you need or what's going to work for your lifestyle. Do you guys do the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I tell people in my classes, number one, I'm like, I don't care what you do in here. Like, I don't care if you can complete any of the tasks in this class as long as you understand how to teach them at home. But I think one of the biggest ones for me that back in the day when we all taught, 20, 25 years ago, it was like, sit means sit and down means down. And if you say sit, stay, and they lay down, you better get them up and tell them. And I'm like, are you ever going to do competitive obedience? And 99% of the people say no. And I said, then I don't care. Right? Yeah. For pet obedience, right? As long as the dog is stationary and not going anywhere, I have found, I don't know if you guys have, most people don't care. They're like, just stay there and that's good enough.
Right.
Yeah, I think to me, it's like there's certain things I use, like place or spot or platform I use because I'm a trainer. And if I need to have a dog hang out until I call them off to be able to exhibit a behavior what have you for
For
you
your
know,
classes. Yeah.
yeah, for class and stuff, I'm fine with that. But ultimately, do I use that in my life? No. Like sit, come, like I might ask them to sit to go out the doorway or come out of a crate. But honestly, like my criteria is so much looser, and ultimately, like you get to pick and choose what's important to you and your dog. Like in your lifetime, that's what's more important, is having that understanding or communication between the two of you that's respectful and cooperative based upon your needs. Not like, I don't care if your dog, I'm not impressed. I think I say this quite a bit in my classes, like I'm not impressed if your dog can do a sit stay at a distance or do agility or some of the other things. Like to me, it's like, and I'm geared more towards pet obedience or pet family pet stuff, where to me it's like, if you can take your dog out for a walk and they're not a nuisance, like that's a big, huge win for me, right? Everything else is on the top, is icing on the cake, right? Everything else is in addition to, but my dogs are my pets first. So everything else, like I like to train. Not everybody shares that same idea or, lifestyle, and that's fine. But there are certain things that are important to me. So,
Well, and this is one thing I always tell people, though, if you teach nothing else, a recall is number one. That's, to me, it's like, it's really important. You better come when I call you, because that's a life-saving thing. So I think the first part of maintaining behaviors is choosing the behaviors you're going to want to maintain. And if you want to train extra, that's fine. But you really want to be clear about, okay, what are things that you need your dog to do in your life as you live together to be able to, to have to so that your lives jive or gel or in that way. So that's the first thing you want to do, right? Like decide like what are some of the things that you want, right? That you feel that you're going to need in your lifestyle. For me, a recall is important. You're going to come when I call you, and I'm big on that. I would like my dogs to stay when I tell them, even I'm still working on that with the lab. Uh, and these are, and so initially right now we're talking about behaviors that we're teaching the dog, right? That we just, behaviors that we want them to learn, right? You want them to learn these behaviors. We're going to talk a little bit later about getting rid of the bad behaviors that you might have come. But right now it's like, what are the things we want to teach and how do you maintain it, right? Because I think that's what happens. People work on training it and then learning the behavior, but then the behavior sometimes might drop off, or it might not be as strong. And it's usually because we get a little sloppy with the reinforcement, or if we don't reinforce it at all, right? So it's one of those things that you need to decide, because the more you use those behaviors in your life, the better off, right? Because then you're going to have a lot of opportunities to reinforce that behavior, and it'll become pretty solid. Don't you guys agree with that? Because it's like I use recall more. I want them to follow me, and I want them to. The recall for me is like number one. It's what I work the most, train the most. They know other things too, but a good stay, a sit down when I need them to for relaxation protocol, and how to leave it. Those are the big ones, right? Don't touch that. You know what I mean? That's leave it is I use a lot, and down and sit and come are the most for me that I use the most.
Yeah, I have one dog, but I won't name which dog that is. The auto check-in is imperative. I use it every single day. And where I use it
part.
Where I use it the most, he's such a little poop. But if he gets overexcited, he runs to the back door and he will bang on my glass sliding door, and that is an absolute do not do that. So if he's really crazy, before I open the gate to the kitchen, you got to look at me, right? But every time before that dog goes outside, because he spins at the door, he gets so wound up to go outside. I'm like, we are not going outside like that, because he slipped and fell on the deck and fell off the deck, and like, it's a daily. So, you know, you need to maintain control when I open this door, that you don't shove your way out the glass door, right? Not to mention all the rest of the times in life, but that's like the big one for me, where I use it like every single time, and I will never let that one, you know, fade. I can't, because I don't trust he won't go through the door.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the other ones, having Roscoe here, which I never have to use for anybody else, is, hey, can I have that? People might use drop it. I find I have switched it up with this dog. This is the first dog I've ever had to switch the verbiage, because drop it somehow has an inflection to it, no matter how nice you try to do it. So I'm always like, hey, can I have that? What do you have? Right. And I was trying to keep it that way, but he is a bit of a resource guarder, even though I don't see nastiness anymore, but I really try and maintain and keep that up. Like, hey, what do you have? Let me have that. Trade you for this. Even if it is kind of something appropriate, I will trade him and give it back, and just maintain that behavior.
And I think for me, like eye contact or the ability to split attention in the face of distraction is critical for me. And then the next thing is settle, and then recall, and then don't pull me. I hate it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I got that one.
Like, there are things that are super important. Recall, not coming when I called. And granted, you see that more with teenagers, where you're like, oh, okay, do I kill you now, or do I put a leash on you and manage the behavior, right? So, and my Papillon right now, I'm like, come. He stands there and looks at me. I'm like,
I don't know. Should I?
I'm like, yes, you should. I'm going to pick you up and give you a cookie. So it's a little challenging, especially when they're teenagers and you're trying to maintain certain behaviors that are important to you. Like, and I don't care about being on the couch or being on my bed.
Right.
As long as you're not guarding anything, I really don't care. Everything else to me is like, if I don't have those other pieces, to me, that's, you know, I'm great with if you can stay and so forth. But honestly, I mean, unless I'm actually competing, it doesn't matter. Like, some of the other stuff doesn't matter as much to me as, do I have a cooperative partner and a compliant partner, a partner who's interested in engaging with me? To me, that's critical. But
right. And you know, the other thing, you guys, I wanted to chat about is maintaining the behavior versus managing.
Yeah.
Right. I think we've all seen it, and it's very easy to fall into the management trap. It is. And sometimes that is the right answer. You must manage it. But I definitely, you know, here's the thing. One of the things you want to give your dogs are life skills, and keep that cooperation and all that. And that's kind of what you have to have in mind when you're trying to maintain the behaviors, right? So teaching them the behaviors is one thing. And so a lot of what we're talking about is maintaining the behavior that we already trained, right? That's really, really important, that we've already trained it. Like, for example, and we'll take, oh yes, that's a good question. Tim, what about maintaining behavior if there's a life change, dog blindness, owner change later in life? Is this management? Well, sometimes you're going to have to, you might actually have a little bit of a retrain there, right? In some cases. And truly, if a dog is blind, you're going to have to readapt and retrain some of the behaviors they might already have. So, for example, instead of when you have a recall, you might need to use a sound instead of, you know, or your voice, and you might have to help the dog along a little bit more, or have a line on them for sure, because it does. So so we're talking about dogs that are not too special in needs, right? Like, you know, because you definitely you might have to go back when there's life changes. You definitely might have to go back and retrain some stuff, right? Which is much more challenging. And we're going to talk a little bit about extinction, right? You're going to have to get rid of some things and maybe add in another. And so, like, for example, when you're training a recall, I'll use that because that's kind of even though my lab puppy doesn't go anywhere, but you never know. He's heading to adolescence, right? Like right now, every time I call him, he gets paid. He gets reinforced May not be the same reinforcement because I may not have a treat or whatever, but he gets reinforced every time because he's 6 months old. I need to strengthen that behavior. I need to do as many reps with him and reinforce as many reps in order to get the nice behavior. Now, my female lab, that's 5, almost 6 now, I don't have to reinforce every time she comes because she's pretty good. But do I still reinforce it? So that is for her, I'm maintaining that behavior. So every once in a while, yeah, I'm going to pay her. I don't pay her as much as I would as I did when she was younger, but as I do with the puppy. But you better believe that every once in a while she comes, she gets reinforced for coming to me, and it's usually a pretty big one because that's a behavior I really want to keep. That I don't want for her to ever doubt about coming to me, right? So let's say she loses her vision. You might have to use other things to be able to get her to come straight to you, or follow your voice, or you're gonna have to manage things more. So management on that recall is that when you have to if you're managing it all the time, means you let the dog drag a line all the time. Right. And in the beginning, at certain stages when you're training it, you do need to let them maybe drag a line. You might have to manage things. But if you're doing that, let's say the dog is, 10 years old and you're still having the dog drag a line, that means you really managed the whole process, right? You didn't get there. And that doesn't mean that certain dogs and certain breeds are not going to be great dogs on a recall. So you might have to, and that's okay. But if you have the ability for your dog to have a decent recall while off leash, and it's really in case of an emergency, right? Unless you're in a place where you can run your dog off leash, most of our dogs aren't off leash. But in an emergency, you better believe you want that dog to come back, right? And so yeah, it's like, so managing is if you never, the dog is always dragging a line, and so you need to know, will the dog come back? Obviously, you're going to set it up in a safe place, like maybe somewhere where there's a gate, or it's gated or whatever, and you can practice your recall to make sure they can come back, come away. But like I said, if you have a long line forever on that, or if you're constantly managing, or let's say in Joanne's case, she uses the auto check-in to get his attention to be able to let him outside. So for her, management would be she always has to put him on a leash, to walk him to the door, to let him out. That's not really training, that's managing it, right? And sometimes if he's really nuts, maybe she has to do that. I don't know. But see the difference? Like she uses, let's check in. It's just a behavior they do every time. Now, if every time she put him on a leash, and so how does she know he wouldn't do that, right?
I also think that it depends on the stage of the dog's life, right? So we find ourselves in management when our dogs are teenagers, because you don't want rehearsal, right? To burn the neural pathway being the same way all the time. This is how we live. And then there's management is not a terrible thing when you're trying to prevent rehearsal of behaviors. Right. But when they get to a certain age and you've trained it, my first question always is, if my dog is not behaving, did I do my job? Like, did I reinforce it enough for them to understand what the right answer is? And then if they don't, then that's on me to figure out how to affect that change in a training fashion, right? So I think it totally depends on the situation, but because at a certain point, puppies or young dogs start to get to a point where they say come, and they kind of think about it, and then they're like, maybe not right now. And that's when I'm like, you need to wear a line, because this is not okay, and you need to come. And then if they come of their own volition, or even if I help them, I'll be like, yay, good dog. I might not treat it. If they come of their own volition, I'll reinforce it. And then I'll be like, yay, okay, go play, come back again. I'll test the theory. Do you understand what you've learned from that? Do you get it? And so forth. But I think it's really relative to the stage of life the dog is in as well.
Right. Right. Because an adolescent dog is going to require more management as you go along, versus an adult dog that already should know the skill, right? and we get this a lot. Well, he should know that. Really? How much have you trained it? How much have you practiced it? How much have you reinforced it? So the big thing is to make sure, does he really know what you're asking? Because sometimes the dog's like, I'm not real sure about that, right? And the dog will tell you if it's clear or not, if you can't get that behavior consistently, right? Like, right, Joanne, like Bam knows when you go to the gate, you're going to make eye contact, even if it's really hard. He knows what to do.
Yep. Yeah. All you have to do is just wait. And he's like, oh, there's a squirrel out there. I'm like, I don't care. Right. And that's when you really, really know that you have it and you don't have to manage it, is no matter what. Right. So there's a squirrel on the railing right outside. Yeah. I'm not getting that auto check-in as quick as I would normally get it. And he's going to be spinning and barking and freaking out. But you know what? If you would like the door to open, these are the rules. And so sometimes it's like, I'm like, nope, that's not enough. Like if I was teaching a brand new dog, sure, that might be enough. Right. But now, nope, I know what you can do. And a quick glance does not tell me that your brain is not going to run through the door. So let's try again. So, and that's where it's like, not necessarily management, but you're reinforcing the behavior that you already have, not reinforcing, you're
maintaining criteria
yeah, of the behavior that you already have. You're not allowing, and I think that's what we all do, right? We all are tired or in a hurry or whatever, right? And we're like, come on, just let's go, right? Whatever that means for you. I can tell you honestly, all three of us do it, right? It's happened. It's life with humans. But if that becomes you, like if you're leaving for work in the morning or trying to get to class at night and, you know, you're in a hurry and your dog drags you to the car, right? And you're trying to work on leash training. That's not helping you. And so that's sort of what we mean about just because I'm in a hurry or just because you're excited or just because all of the things, right? Every once in a while is not going to break your dog, but when they're like, ooh, it's time to go to class, she doesn't care, she's in a hurry, let's go, woo, I'm dragging you to the car, right? And then it becomes okay in that scenario.
Right. And Ronnie put that in there. She goes, needed not pulling while walking on leash ice yesterday in Minnesota, having a couple and Ronnie, that's why loose leash walking is so challenging, because you have to do it no matter what, especially when they're young.
Ice is always a good reminder of whether your dog walks
our criteria, right? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So that's definitely, so on those behaviors, you're always kind of testing, right? Does he really understand what I'm asking? Because I think a lot of times, and we see it with some of our clients, well, he should know that. It's like, well, how much have you practiced it? Have you gone out and practiced it and out in the world? Have you, and they're like, well, no, then he does it at home, which is what we get all the time. It's like, well, yeah, home's a comfortable spot. So you have to make sure you proof the behavior, and then you just maintain it as you go. But you really have to do a decent job of really being clear to the dog that this is the behavior I want, whatever that may be. Right. So I think, so for example, and I know there's not a recipe, but like, for example, Jive, if I do a recall, let's say in a week, if I do, I don't know, like now, because she's going to be 6 years old. If I do 5 recalls, and it's just regular life, like if she gets out of my office and I have to call her back, or if or if we're walking to the back, in the back area, and we've done a search, let's say, call her back and she's off leash outside. Let's say that happens, I don't know, 20 times in a week. I might reinforce 5 of those times because she knows it. The other stuff is just life, right? It's like, come on, let's go back in the car. I'm not going to pay her every time, but every once in a while she does get paid. And some weeks it's maybe 10 times. I'll pay half of them because I want that behavior to be very, very strong. So I do reinforce it. I don't reinforce it all the time, but I reinforce it enough that she's going to be like, okay, today I might get a cookie or whatever. So And that's maintenance. And the behaviors that you use on a regular basis and that you work on every day are the ones that are going to maintain and you're going to keep, right? So that's why, and so that's why you have to choose what behaviors are important to you to be able to get what you want, right? All right. Anything you guys want to add? Because the other thing I want to talk about now is if we accident, and it happens to everybody, if we're getting bad behaviors or the behavior may not be what you want, how do you go back and how do you maintain? How do you get rid of it? Right? And put in the what you train the behavior you do want. Right? Let's say, like in my case, I did a lot of preventative training with my labs because they tend to want to be counter surfers when I'm cooking or when something's on the counter or whatever, and I don't want that. When I had a beagle, it wasn't such a problem because she couldn't reach the counter. But what I did with my dogs to teach them not to counter surf, if they're in the kitchen, I usually make sure it's training, right? And in real time, right? I'm making dinner. I have the labs there. I always reinforce them for not jumping up on the counter. So every once in a while, I'm moving around in the kitchen, and they get paid for staying down there, right? They always get paid for being on the floor. They can be in the kitchen, they can pick up stuff, but I reinforce them every so often, and that is a very difficult behavior for them to do to make sure they stay not jump up. So I reinforce that much more often. I almost reinforce it every time that not to jump up. If they happen to jump on the counter, because now I have a young puppy, he did it once, and then I put him behind the gate so he couldn't be in the kitchen with me for a few minutes. And then I let him back again and allowed him to, because right now I'm in the training, right? I'm training him not to jump up because I don't want that. Versus my female lab, she never jumps on the counter here because she knows if she stays down, she gets paid. If not, she doesn't want to get put away. Like she doesn't want to go to the other side of the thing. Even though she wants to check it, but she checks it from a distance to see what's there. So those are the behaviors. So you also want to think about behaviors that they offer naturally that you're getting that suit you to maintain and keep those behaviors strong as well, right? As long as they don't jump up, they get paid, and I don't give them a lot of opportunities to jump up and practice, like Lisa said, have burn those neural pathways of jumping up all the time on the counter. I don't let it get there. I started training my labs when they were little. If they stayed down by me and not jump up, they got paid early on just for being down there when I'm in the kitchen, right?
Unless they're unattended and there's cat food on the counter.
Yes. Well, now with my new kitchen, it's not a problem anymore. She doesn't jump up anymore because she used to jump up and eat cat food, my female. But now I think it's either too high or where the cat food is situated, it's not as accessible. So that helps too.
And I think a couple of things you pointed out was consequences for behavior, right? So it's also about criteria, maintaining criteria, and then also giving them an opportunity to say, if you do this. And I think a lot of times people want to parent from the couch. Like, my husband does the same thing, like, get off, don't do that. And I'm like, you actually have to get up and do something about it the second time you say it. You can't just expect it to happen magically. You have to get up and do something about it. And I'm like that. So the dogs are like, oh gosh, here she comes. Then I'm going to lose an opportunity for whatever being free with everybody. Right. And so, a lot of it is, do you have follow through? Because then if you mean it, they're going to go, oh gosh, this is not a good idea. Mm-hmm. And then also the other thing I think to keep in mind is placement of reinforcement. So for your labs, right, you reinforce them on the floor, correct? Versus, right. And those are things to continue to remind yourself of, where am I reinforcing it? So if I'm taking a cookie off the counter and giving it to him from my hand, or am I putting it on the floor saying on the floor is the better way?
Yep. And right. Usually I have a little bit, some treats on my counter, And if they're down there and because they usually sit by me while I'm chopping stuff up, I reach over, give them a treat, good dogs, and then go on and keep doing what I'm doing. And I do that, every so often, so that it pays so much better when they just do that instead of trying to jump on the counter. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna play on the like jumping on the counter food thing, right? I'm single. I haven't eaten at a table unless I was at somebody else's house in a long time. But right. So it's like I might eat at my desk or I might eat on the couch or whatever. So for me personally, I always forget something. I'm like, oh, I forgot a fork or go fill up my water or whatever it is. So for me, in my home, it's important. Don't eat my stuff. Like those fighting words. So
She's a resource guarder. That's
a little bit. So, right. So when you think about, even when you're in the training phase of all of this, right? Why would the dog not take advantage of food that's at the level for them to eat? Like, why would I not do that? You left it there. Clearly it's for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just having the expectation that the dog's not going to steal your stuff is totally wrong. So,
yeah, right.
So for me, like when I get a new dog, that is one of the big things that I do as well. But you have to think about, where do you start? You can't walk out of the room and be like, don't do it, right? I will put it there and they can walk up and I'm like, don't do it, right? And they're like, oh, okay. And I'll give them a piece of food, and I will actually, same thing that Lisa was talking about, right? Treating for 4 on the floor, right? And then I might take a step away. And then I might put the dog in between the food and me, so I'm peeling back the onion of bits of behavior so that I can be right there. So they're not wrong. Right. Because I think what happens when Lisa was talking about where the reward happens or the reward in general, if you allow the dog to make the mistake 3 times and then you pay them the 4th time for being right, guess what? They just rewarded themselves 3 times, probably better than the 1 cookie that you gave them. So if you start slow enough, they don't get an opportunity to make a bad choice. That solidifies behavior so much faster than if you're just going to see how it goes. And
yeah,
like we're just going to take the diaper off the 9 months. I don't know how old kids are when you potty train them, but take the diaper off the 2-year-old and just hope you don't have an accident. Let us know when you got to go. Right. I mean, it's sort of the equivalent to that, right? Like, I don't know how to tell you that yet. Yeah. So think about it in that.
How do you handle searching countertop over counter surfing?
So I've never had a correlation between the 2 of them. She's talking nose work. Like if there's a hide up.
Oh yeah, there's never. So Ronnie, that's a really good question, because some people think that if you teach the dog to jump up on stuff in nose work, that it's going to result in counter surfing. Nope. Because
you can follow odor to the clouds if you want to, but not food.
There's no odor. There's no, if you're not working, if there's no scent, odor that you're trained to, it's like you shouldn't be jumping up there. And people seem to make that correlation. They said, well, now he's jumping up. Well, I think what happens there is I think the dogs get more confidence going up on things in nose work, and then they decide, maybe I should check this out. Not because there's odor up there, but because now they have the confidence to do that, right?
Well, the only caveat I would do is if you're on primary, or meaning you're searching for food, when the dog is new to the sport, I would not be placing food hides on top of my counters. Like,
amen. Yep.
Don't do that, because that is absolutely free reign for the dog. Like, oh, look what's up here.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Yeah, because it's like, because my dog, I mean, obviously my dogs do nose work, and the nose work did not increase their counter surfing at all. It didn't do a thing. It's like she knows she's at home. I'm cooking, because the labs are notorious. My puppy, I think a week or so ago, he's like, I'm going to see what's up there. I'm like, oh no, you're not. So he's after the napkins, not food, right? So yeah, no, usually there's not a big correlation, Ronnie, as long as you reinforce the you reinforce what you do want in this case, right? Mambo's an angel. Yeah, right. Yeah, you reinforce the behavior you do want. And I think people miss that part. They miss that. It's like if you're getting a behavior you like, if you're getting a behavior like I like when my lab puppy likes to stay on the floor and he sits there by me, you better believe I'm going to reinforce that. I definitely want to reinforce that. So that's what I mean. I want you to, when you're thinking about maintaining a behavior, also think about the behaviors that they're offering naturally. If you want to keep that behavior, if it's something that you're seeing that you like, that like, wow, he's really naturally offering that, and that's really good, and you need to pay it to keep that behavior with you, right? Because I think we miss that. I think we all get focused on the behaviors that you've taught, that they've learned, but how about those behaviors that they offer out of just normal, right?
I think our culture is about like catching them when they're wrong versus catching them when they're right. And I think that's more important than catching them when they're right to build the behaviors and patterns of behavior we want, versus always telling them when they're wrong. I mean, because I know if somebody always told me, pointed out everything I did wrong, I'd be like, okay, I'm wrong. I'm going to do what I want to do anyway, because it doesn't matter. And as a dog, I think they're opportunists. So if it's going to benefit them and they're not getting direction or guidance towards what is appropriate, that's a whole nother story.
Right. Yeah, because it's like I think we missed that piece, you guys. Like we missed the part of he's offering that behavior naturally. Yay! I'll give you another example with my puppy. He jumped up into the van for a couple of times. Do you believe? You better believe I reinforced that. He jumped up on his own. I didn't ask him. He jumped into this crate. Do you believe? I reinforced that like crazy because I want more of that. So you want to start thinking about, okay, he jumped up in my van in his crate. Boy, I want more of that. I'm going to pay that because he offered it without me asking.
Yeah. And I mean, putting it more into human terminology, when you think about it that way, it's like the kindergarten, preschool, first grade teachers, right? Who has the gold stars next to their name on the chalkboard, right? Oh, I want a gold star. Well, be a model student and do your best and provide best behavior, and I'll give you one, right? So it's more about being rewarded for the good as opposed to don't maybe take a star away, So I think we lose that concept. And part of it is too, right? Like when Nancy was talking in the very beginning about, well, Jive's 6 now. So I don't expect, that I'm going to give her a cookie every time she comes. But if your dog is struggling, you do have to. If your dog is struggling, don't expect they should just do better.
Do it. Right.
Right. I mean, if they're having a hard time, sometimes you have to go back. Classic example, right? Roscoe, my foster dog, he's been here about 10 months now. And he had a fantastic shut up. He had a fantastic recall. He's still up for adoption if anyone would like to check him out at Canine Kindness. Anyway, so he had this amazing recall. You just say his name once and boom, he'd come flying in the house, right? Does he do that now? Nope. So yes, he still comes, but he doesn't come with the same vigor. But I stopped paying him, right? I don't pay my dogs that well anymore. So I did stop paying him, and it has faded a little bit. So knowing that, I should be able to keep the cookie jar by the door and just start randomly reinforcing it again, and it should come back right away.
Right. And that's the thing. And that's a really good point, Joanne. Like I'm very conscious of reinforcing Jive's recall on a regular, not as often, but I always make sure I do, because it's easy when you have a dog that comes right away. She comes every time, not to think about reinforcing it. And then you start to lose that behavior. Yeah. So my focus is always keeping it strong all the time. And, so I make sure that I don't take it for granted that she's just going to do it. I always make sure that there's reinforcement at some point. And if I happen to have something that she really likes, whatever, I reinforce that as well. So yeah. And so far that's always Joanne made a good point. You want to make sure the behavior is still strong, that the behavior is still strong. You're checking it all the time. Is this what I want? Yes, I want her to turn around no matter what's going on and come back to me. Can she still do that? Yep. Even if like when she gets out of my office, if there's another dog, I can call her off the other dog. As long as I can still do that, and that one, and if she comes off of something very exciting or big, you better believe I will call her away from that. And I would reinforce it for sure. Right? Because that was a big deal for her. So that's what we're talking. Like, you make sure that you're always checking that that behavior is where you want it to be. And that's why you need to decide what the behavior is and how do you want it performed. And you're going to hold that criteria for forever. And I think what happens for us, we're like, well, she knows it, so I'm not going to work that hard. And you kind of relax a little bit on stuff. And that's the problem. And then it's the dog's fault that they're not listening, or that they're not coming, or they're whatever. So it's like, no, you have to reinforce the behaviors that you've taught them and behaviors that they're offering you on a natural, right? And I'm very lucky. My young puppy has got a phenomenal recall right now. So am I paying the hell out of it all the time? You better believe it, because I am getting it 100% of the time, and I pay it 100% of the time because he's 6 months and he's starting to enter adolescence, which is, yuck. You see what I mean? So I want to keep it through, hopefully through his adolescence. But I also know that that might not happen, right? That there might be times where he's going to be like, he might not come. Right now, he's all about it. So,
when I think too, like, I didn't experience this with my other dogs are doing okay, but I know Riff is more about peeing on the world if he goes out in the yard. So I have to go get him. Like, and that's the other thing. Like, you have to have a consequences, whether it's like you go, okay, well, if you're not going to do that, I'm going to go get you versus,
right.
Or you're going to drag a line. So I think management has a role in that.
Oh, absolutely.
But it totally depends on the circumstances, right? And the age of the dog. Like, my older dogs, my border collie comes running full blast every time, right or wrong, through the mud onto me, which is my most unfavorite time. Mm-hmm. But then we work on, then I have him come and I'm like, sit, and I wipe his paws. And then after a certain point, we start playing tug. For him, the tug is more reinforcing than treats.
Sure.
Right? And so finding the right reinforcement for that individual in front of you is critical, right? So some dogs like cookies, other dogs like other things. So like for Riff, he's all about, I want to pee on things. So we're working through that. That's very fun.
Yeah. Well, now Mambo again still comes 100% of the time, but now I notice more every so often he'll be like, I'm going to sniff this for a minute. And I'm like, oh. And he's at the age now, if I close the door, he's like, wait, what? So he, but he's pretty good about that, right? And so that's the thing, you guys, is and he's also not pulling on a leash right now. So am I reinforcing that? You better believe it. So he's offering things for me that he's offering behaviors on his own. So I'm always catching those, especially when they're young like that. Because it's like sometimes they have some natural things that are like, oh, this is great, right? And we're going to reinforce it. And I think that's something that we don't do on a regular, right?
Time to potty. You should reinforce that.
Oh, I had to take him to work today so he would poop. Anyway, he's very emotional about that. So one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about is about extinction, right? How behaviors go away, and that's why we have to keep them up, right? Extinction is a weakening of a conditioned response. So if you don't reinforce it, or they don't practice it, again, this also works great. It works in a positive for bad behaviors, right? And it works in a negative for if you tell them a really good sit and you don't reinforce it and you don't practice it, it's going to go away. But it also is helpful when the dog is doing some, I don't know if he barking, which I don't know if I can ever extinguish that. But if you adjust their environment where the barking isn't as reinforcing, that will also go away, right? So it works for if you've whatever you've taught them, you want to make sure that you don't extinguish those behaviors because it's easy to do it. Like you don't reinforce it, it'll go away. Anything you don't reinforce over time will go away. Right. So you want to be,
Unless it's reinforcing for the dog, then they don't care about you.
that's correct.
Mhm.
Like barking or like jumping on the counter.
Yes. But
Right?
lucky-
I mean, they get that first stick of butter and it's like crack. They're going to keep
Mhm.
checking.
Yes. That is
That's a
true
hard
statement.
one. That is
Yeah.
a tough one. Once they've been reinforced, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's what I mean. It's like if they get reinforced once, you don't keep setting it up where they're not going to be successful. That's really, really important. So you got to definitely maintain, and and you want to be able to. So when you're talking about behavior, to maintain, you want to reinforce what you want, and then you want to not reinforce the other so that you can get rid of that behavior. Again, depending as long as it's not reinforcing for the dog, like barking and peeing on the world, I guess, is very reinforcing too.
Yeah. Well, and let me give you my human. I always try and have human examples. So for my beginner classes, right, sometimes it's people's first dog and they don't get it, right? So I'm always like, try to put it in human perspectives. So if I came to your house for 1 month and every single day you checked your mailbox and there was $100 bill in there, right? What is the first thing you're going to do when you return to your house? Check your mailbox, right?
Yeah.
Unless you're, a millionaire and then $100 you wouldn't really care about, right? So what is that resource to you, right? So it does matter. But, and then let's say, month 2, 3 times a week it's in your mailbox. How many days of the week are you going to check your mailbox? Well,
Every day.
most of us every day, right? Then month 3, it's only going to be in there 1 day a week. Is that right where you're going to start dropping off and maybe you check it every day? Maybe you got bills to pay and not enough money, or maybe you're like, yeah, that'd be a nice surprise once a week. So you don't check it all the time. It's not in your brain, right? And then, month 4, 5, whatever month I was on, right? Eventually you get to the point where it's only in there 1 time a month. Are you still excited about it? Maybe, maybe not. So think about that from the dog's perspective though, right? I got that ham sandwich off the couch the counter that one time, right? So I'm going to check that counter every day for, 90 days because that was the best ham sandwich. I've never had anything like that before in my life, So at what point does the dog stop checking it every day? So I find this is where people really struggle with this, right? Is because you're doing good. You let your guard down. The dog gets the second ham sandwich, right? And maybe it's, 75 days out and they're like, oh, see, I knew I should check it every day, right?
Yes.
For dogs that really, really love food, right? That is super reinforcing. So you might now spend the next 8-9 months where that dog is constantly, checking your counters on a drive-by every time they go through the kitchen. So I think using that scenario, when you hear us talk about don't let them make the mistake, right? And I feel you if you have, children or people who leave things on the edge of the counter. It's like, it's hard the more people you have in the home to manage that situation. But if that is the case, when I have a young dog or when we are cooking or whatever, that might be where I use management, right? Like we don't clean up the counter until after we're done with dinner, right? Well, I might put a gate on the kitchen or I might put the dog away. I'm not going to give that opportunity when I'm not paying attention. So the dog doesn't make those bad decisions. So that would be management and training where they would go hand in hand.
Right. And Crystal says she tells the cats all the time to stop reinforcing getting chased. Hasn't worked yet. I know. The cats, yeah. Because and that's a really good example, Crystal. Like my cats don't run from my dogs. I think they may have run once or twice. And then after a while, they figured out they were not, nothing bad was going to happen. So the cats stopped running. And yeah, my dog's no longer it was reinforced once or twice, but it wasn't enough of a reinforcer for the dogs to keep doing it. So, and now the dogs don't chase the cats, but if the cat runs every time, guess what? They're going to do it every time. Because
then to help that situation, then what do? I'd keep the dog on leash and reinforce relaxing by my side or eye contact. as the cat moves around and stuff like that. Don't allow rehearsal of it again, because the more they rehearse it, the better they get at it. And depending on the situation, there's it's kind of like the OCD behavior. So I had a private situation where a dog was, the reflection on the collar, the tag was getting the dog's attention. So the dog started like following it and looking around. I'm like, take the tag off. Don't allow rehearsal. Of course, the dog was a teenager. There's kind of a dopamine effect, right? Where they become more amped up with and excited and self-reinforced by like gambling, so to speak. You hit the slot, you hit the slot, you hit the slot, you keep winning. They're going to keep it up. So you don't want that behavior to rehearse either. So management versus training is critical at that point. And then when you do get behaviors you want, you need to reinforce them. And again, there's nothing wrong with not wanting to work it. I mean, I'm going to tell you, like, sometimes I'm like, just get in your kennels, have a chew. I can't right now. I need to be me. Right. And so then you're like, all right, well, that happens. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Just know that you can't expect the behavior to be secured if you're not teaching them the right thing to do instead of, rehearsing. So
right. And that's a big part of maintaining good behavior is making sure that they're not rehearsing stuff you don't want. If you might have let's say a great stay, but not when the cats are running around. It's like, no, you have to work on a great stay no matter what's going on. Right. And like I said, my lab Jive took the longest to leave the cats alone. She was almost 9 months. And finally, one time learning, one of the cats, in no uncertain terms, gave her a nice big correction, and she was all better after that. Never did it again. It kind of took away the desire to the whole thing, and there's a newfound respect for the cats. So, and sometimes that has to happen. And some dogs respect the other animals much sooner. So it really depends. But again, you reinforce the behaviors you want. So when oh my God, my animals.
You have something to say.
So I also reinforce my dogs for not chasing. If the cat was passing by, I reinforced them or I called them away. I told them to come, and I told them to come, and they would come away from the cat, right? So it was kind of and it was just, and for, like I said, for Jive, it was much more, for my cat, for my dog was much more challenging. Oh my God. My
Emotions.
outside cats, I'm going to tell you, Ronnie, it's not the same as an indoor cat.
Right.
The shepherd wants to go poop, Tim. That's what he needs.
But here's the thing, and only because I know this, Ronnie, I'm gonna call you out here. How many times have you sat outside and practiced those cats? I know you tried a little, but they're there, and I've seen her set up, and the cats just come around. Right, they're on the side of her garage. They're crawling up things. They're sitting on the cars. And as tough as that is. It's like the big red dog and squirrels. I have not sat outside and practiced squirrels. I have not. And he's an idiot. And I managed that situation because, still trying. Yeah, I don't have the kind of time that is going to need to reinforce it. Exactly. I just don't. So that's another example of choosing to manage a behavior, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he can deal with them if we're in an exterior or searching. He can work through that, but in life, given free reign, no, he'll take a squirrel every time.
Yeah. So. Well, and like I said, the outdoor cats are not the same as indoor cats for dogs, right? And people make that very, very incorrect assumption, right? Yep. My dogs are fantastic with our indoor cats, but I suspect an outdoor cat running, it's not going to be the same thing.
No, I know. Stop it, Tango.
Yeah, right. It's so Michelle, as she says, it's like they understand the pack cats, but anybody that's doesn't belong is going to be a different story, and that's and I think that's just normal, right, for dogs. And it's a matter of, like you said, like Joanne said, are you going to sit out there and work it? It depends on what you want to work on. Going back to the beginning, right? Is it a big problem? Is it not? And what are the things you want that your dogs to? What behaviors are the ones you want to maintain? Because unless you have lots and lots of time, and lots of where you can train your dog at a time, most people aren't able to keep everything up. You're just going to keep up what you use on a regular, right?
Pick your battles.
Yeah, definitely. For outside kitties, yeah, it's a different thing. People think, well, he's good with cats. Yeah. He's good with cats inside my house, but outside my house, it's all good.
Yeah.
So one of the things I want you to take away, just to think about and kind of look at, is you definitely want to have where you're going to maintain the behaviors you want, really, truly, because I wish I could tell you, oh yeah, my dogs know everything really great and perfect, and they do everything right, and they have great behaviors. No, they have good the stuff they're really good at is stuff that I reinforce all the time, that I need and want for us to live together, right? So don't try to keep everything up, right? So the stuff that you want, so you could do in tiers, right? The stuff that's really important, you're going to reinforce more often, and you're going to keep up that behavior. The stuff that is kind of and it's loose, you're going to maybe not reinforce as much, and it's going to be a little bit not as strong. And then there's stuff that might fade away that you might have learned in training class, but you're really not going to use it, so you don't. And so then you don't have that, right? And then and training is it's a progression, right? You might not need it now, but you might need something later. So it's like, okay, it's okay then to go back and train it. But just because you learn how to stay in basic obedience school, and then the dog, and you didn't really use it for 5 years, and now you're going to go back and use it, well, you got to go back and retrain it because you don't have that, right? You don't have the skill. So it's one of those things you really want to think about, what's important and what you're going to reinforce, but also look for the behaviors you're getting on a natural. You're getting natural behaviors, and natural things are offering you natural things. Make sure you pay it to maintain the behavior and have it and capture it, right? Because some dogs, like my puppy, I'm looking for it because it's much easier to just reinforce him if he does it than for me to train him to do it. So it's kind of, at this time, it's kind of a lazy way out, right? My puppy, I keep an eye on it. Make sure he's, if he offers me the behavior, I'm going to pay it. So then that way I don't have to worry about training it. That's it. So it just makes me a little bit of a lazy trainer, but that's what I do. So anyway, do you guys have anything to add?
Nope, I think we pretty much covered it.
Yeah. All right, all. Have a great rest of the night. And I know all of us are going to be probably going to bed early because daylight savings time. So have a good rest of the day. Thanks a lot.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.